Hi, Frank Spillers here, founder of Experience Dynamics, and it's time for this week's UX Power Up. Today's topic is the culture of UX. Now, many organizations are building up teams, they're building up and ramping up on their UX efforts, they are staffing up positions and doing more and more user research and usability studies. All good stuff. The underlying aspect of any organizational effort like that is culture building. And so just like when organizations, 5-6 years ago, some organizations 2-3 years ago, were ramping up with agile UX or moving into lean UX practices, UX requires the same type of cultural shift. And so one of the first things here in my definition of culture of UX that's important is user contact. This is the defining hallmark characteristic of organizations with a user experience maturity. And it's basically allowing your teams to make contact with users. How else can they do user experience research? How else can they do advocacy without actually being given access to their users? Now, some industries such as financial services and certain aspects of, for example, healthcare and other industries have historically been difficult to have access to your users. But I've worked in all of these industries over the years, and I've worked with organizations where somehow it is easy, and organizations somehow it's not easy. And I find that in the organizations where it's not easy, it's like, there's a belief that, we can't talk to our users, or senior management will say, no, we can't talk to users. That's definitely out, especially with products with the $200,000-$300,000 price tag for a piece of software. We don't want to jeopardize our sales or our customer relationship by actually talking to our users. So that's the fear-based approach, which doesn't build very good culture in any type of leadership or success venture. It's really important that user contact is allowed and fostered and nurtured in building organizations. The second one here is staff positions. Well, staff positions. Could have guessed that one, right? Actually having internal folks, and the key here is qualified staff. It's not enough to grab your designer and turn them into the UX person in the organization. Now, many organizations will do that, or grab a developer, maybe take a business analyst and turn them into a UX person. That's all fine and well. And one of the things I've ran across, however, is that there's a credibility, a believability gap that often is left. And so certain teams working with that individual, or those individuals will say, you're not really a usability expert, so, which is more of a cognitive science, psychology type of background in terms of the field of study, the qualifications. So it's really important that when staffing, you actually staff with people that can communicate believably and that can communicate effectively, because that's really half the battle with working with user experience advocacy in an organization. The third key here is training. So offering training to your staff, having them all kind of on the same page, having them all getting the latest and greatest information, resources, and tools available to them. And we do a lot of specialized user experience trainings with organizations, especially ones that are ramping up. And it's just a tremendous leap from a disorganized, herding cats kind of situation to, wow, all of a sudden we're aligned and on the same page after a day or two of training. So training can be a very powerful catalyst. And the fourth one here is funding projects. So funded projects are another hallmark that you can't really do UX on the side. You can't really do UX informally. You can't really do it as a part of another job. I've worked in large organizations where there isn't really a UX culture there, and so some poor product manager is also the UX guy. Some poor business analyst she's also the UX specialist and kind of doing it on the side in addition to her other job. And that's a really tough position. It's really important that there is funding available, that that a project can actually get resources. And that means using outside consultants. That means, putting people in the organization, giving them real budgets that they can do this kind of work with. There have been studies done on this, and the question that is usually asked of me was how much of my budget should be budgeted. And it's really the magic number is between 10 to 12% of a product development budget should be spent on UX for that particular project. So take your entire dev budget, and around 11.5% is a statistic that one study found. And so the rule of thumb is really between 10 to 12% of your product development budget for that product. Now, the final cultural characteristic of UX is ROI and buy-in. So the return on investment, the measurement of your efforts, the ability to show value in the organization and have that value shown to leadership. The organizations that are excelling in this field today, among Fortune 500 companies, are the ones where the executive buy-in is there, and usually organically there, where your Bezos or your Brin or Page or these founders of companies will bring an organic love of UX to the teams that they create. But it's also grassroots, so you need your engineers and your developers to be bought in. I worked with a startup where one of the developers, the CEO was bought in. One of the developers said, I'm not making that change to the interface. And I said, why not? And he said, because I don't like it. And I said, yeah, but the usability test report showed that the users need that. And he said, I don't care. It's not something I agree with. So even though the CEO was a real evangelist of user experience and was spending money on it, the developer was not willing to budge. So having that organic grassroots, that love of users at the engineering level, which historically hasn't been there, that's a new thing that's occurred, is equally important. So building culture UX has these 5 hallmarks and characteristics, which I think are all hugely important, and it's definitely a process. But I hope this helps with first steps in building your UX maturity and competency in your organization. Happy UXing. We'll see you on a future UX Power Up.